We often see life stories of really big figures come out after they're gone, right? Like a final word.
Yeah, that's the usual pattern.
But what about when someone like Pope Francis decides to release his autobiography now? And with a very specific reason.
Exactly. That's what we're digging into today with Hope, his autobiography.
And what makes it really stand out is it's the first time any pope has published one.
Ever.
Apparently it was meant for release after his passing, but got fast-tracked for the 2025 Jubilee Year of Hope.
Right. That change in timing alone, it definitely makes you think.
Totally. So our mission here is to go beyond just the basic details we have, mostly from the Amazon page for Hope.
Yeah, we want to really pull out the key insights. What's this book likely about? Why publish it now? And, why might it matter?
Okay, let's start with that context.
Yeah.
The fact it was meant to be posthumous, but the, quote, needs of our times and this Jubilee year pushed it forward. That sounds like, there's a real sense of urgency there, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
And it's being presented as his legacy,
Yeah.
his spiritual, moral, even social and civic testament.
Aimed at everyone, not just a specific group. That's pretty ambitious.
It is.
Yeah.
And there's that New York Times quote about it vividly recreating his early life,
Right.
which suggests something quite personal. And apparently it took 6 years to write.
6 years.
Yeah. Tracing everything from his family's roots in Italy,
Right.
their move to Latin America,
Okay.
his childhood, his calling, his whole adult life, right up through the papacy.
Yeah.
So it's comprehensive, a real reflection.
And the themes he gets into, this is where it gets, really interesting for me. It's described as intimate, even talking about personal passions. But maybe more importantly, it promises an unsparing look at key moments in his papacy.
Unsparing definitely catches the eye, suggests a certain transparency maybe.
Yeah, maybe more than we'd expect.
And the description uses words like candid, fearless, even prophetic when talking about how he addresses today's big issues.
Like what specifically?
Well, war and peace, they explicitly mention Ukraine and the Middle East.
Okay.
Also migration, the environmental crisis, social policy, the role of women,
Wow.
sexuality, tech developments, the future of the church itself, and, religion more broadly.
So he's really not holding back. It sounds like he's trying to tackle pretty much everything.
It seems that way. Engaging with the whole spectrum of modern life through his own lens.
And it's not just, like, a policy paper. The description mentions revelations, anecdotes, illuminating thoughts.
Right, and calls it a thrilling and very human memoir.
Moving, and sometimes funny, too. It sounds like he's aiming for a real human connection.
I think so. A story of a life alongside the moral and spiritual
It
testament.
feels very personal.
And the fact they mention remarkable photographs, including private unpublished ones,
Ah,
that just underlines the personal aspect, doesn't it? Giving a fuller picture of the man, not just the Pope.
Right. Let's touch on the practical stuff. Hardcover release, January 14th, 2025.
Random House is the publisher. About 320 pages.
And available in, over 80 countries?
And that's significant. Speaks to a global audience, a global conversation he wants to start.
Definitely emphasizes the universal themes you mentioned. That simultaneous release is quite a statement.
Absolutely.
Now, the intro excerpt gives us a bit more insight into his mindset, right? He calls the book a journey of hope.
Linked to his family and the wider faith community.
And I liked his take on autobiography, not just his story, but the baggage we carry. That's a powerful image.
It really is. And his idea about memory, that it's not just the past, but also about what will be.
Yeah, a present that never ceases to pass.
Right.
It's quite philosophical.
It is. Like, our experiences are constantly shaping us right now and shaping where we hope to go.
And his point about wait and hope, esperar in Spanish covering both.
Right.
But for him, hope isn't passive waiting. It's the virtue of movement, the engine of change.
Exactly. He connects memory and our ideals, our sort of utopia, as the fuel for building dreams. He even says we need to revisit faded dreams.
So it's a very active, dynamic idea of hope.
Very much so. Not just sitting back, but actively working toward something better, drawing on the past.
And then he ties it to faith, saying, hope doesn't deceive. All is born to blossom in an eternal springtime.
Yeah, a very optimistic view, rooted in his Christian beliefs.
And the intro ends with that line, in the end, we will say only, I don't recall anything in which you are not there.
Wow. That sets a deeply personal spiritual tone for the whole thing.
It really does. Suggests a life lived with that constant awareness.
A desire to share that perspective.
So let's think about the man himself. Jorge Mario Bergoglio, born 1936, Buenos Aires. Parents were Italian migrants.
Right, and his background before the priesthood, a chemical technician.
Yeah, then philosophy, theology, ordained, became provincial of the Jesuits in Argentina.
A significant leadership role early on.
Then bishop, Archbishop of Buenos Aires, cardinal, and finally Pope Francis in 2013.
The first Jesuit pope, first from Latin America, lots of firsts.
And he's the one who announced this 2025 Jubilee year with the theme Pilgrims of Hope, which fits perfectly.
It really does.
Yeah.
And given that we're recording this in late April 2025,
Right.
and he passed away just recently on April 21st, it adds another layer, doesn't it?
It really does. It makes this autobiography feel even more like a final message, a testament, as you said.
Exactly. Knowing it came out just before he died gives it extra weight. And we should mention Carlo Musso, who collaborated, and Richard Dixon, the translator.
Key people in bringing this to a wider audience.
Definitely.
We also saw some popular highlights from Kindle readers, giving a sense of what's resonating early on.
Yeah. What stood out?
Well, this one. Promises based on fear are the usual theme of populist movements, and they mark the beginning of dictatorships and wars.
That's a sharp observation on current politics.
Very direct. And it continues, for other people are you, really points out the danger in othering.
Yeah, very much reflecting his warnings against division. And there was another one.
About building bridges versus walls. Only those who build bridges can move forward. The builders of walls end up imprisoned.
By the walls they themselves have built. That sounds exactly like his message of dialogue.
Most of all, their hearts become entrapped. Strong stuff.
Very consistent with his themes over the years.
And the customer reviews. Sounds like people are responding well overall.
Yeah, very positive. 4.7 out of 5 stars. Quite a few ratings already. Lots of words like inspirational, insightful, transparent, compelling.
So hitting the mark on that personal connection.
Seems like it. People mention spiritual riches, enlightening content, and interestingly how it connects his personal history to his views on current issues.
Does it seem to be reaching beyond just Catholics?
Apparently so. Some reviews explicitly say it resonates with non-Catholics too, suggesting that universal appeal we talked about.
That's interesting. What else are reviewers saying?
Things like it's honest, true. One called it his best work.
High praise.
Yeah. Others say it gives real insight into his life, his lessons. A non-Catholic reviewer highlighted his compassion for mankind and how it tackles peace and war.
All tying back to that core message of hope and his own humble background shaping him.
Exactly. These early reactions suggest the book is landing as intended, personal, yet relevant to big global challenges.
Okay, and finally, there were mentions of related books.
Right. Other works by him, often focused on hope or the Jubilee year, like A Light in the Night, Life, My Story Through History, I Want You to Be Happy.
Provides more context for his thinking.
And it reminds us of those qualities people associate with him. Humility, concern for the poor, commitment to dialogue.
Qualities that presumably shine through in the autobiography, and some of his major writings like Lumen Fidei and Evangelii Gaudium were listed too.
Yeah, just placing this work within his broader output.
So wrapping up this deep dive,
Yeah.
it feels like Hope is, well, more than just another autobiography.
Definitely seems that way. It's this unique, deeply personal look at his life and leadership, tackling huge issues, but all grounded in that central theme of hope.
And the timing, releasing it just before the Jubilee, and as it turned out, just before his passing, really underlines that sense of it being a significant parting message.
Absolutely. It feels like a deliberate effort to offer guidance and connection right when he felt it was most needed.
So hopefully you listening now have a much clearer picture of what this book offers, its scope, and why it's generating this kind of interest.
Yeah, going beyond just the announcement to understand the potential significance.
Which leads us to that final thought to leave you with. Pope Francis talks about hope as active, as an engine of change. He reflects on all these global challenges in the book. So the question for you is, what does that kind of active hope actually look like in your own life, in your community?
Yeah, how might engaging with his personal story, his perspective on these big issues, how might that offer some fresh insight for navigating, well, everything going on now and whatever comes next?
Definitely something to think about.